Hi everybody, this is Dr. Jenkins, and this video is going to be for our blood vessel number 1 lab. All right, so I've pulled down the video that you have access to on Brightspace. This is the video that shows pictures of the blood vessels. So I'm going to be using that today. But here's an outline of what we have coming up. So for this is blood vessel lab number 1. So we're going to do the blood vessels in and around the heart, and then the blood vessels of the arm. Next time we have lab, we'll do the gut, the abdomen, and then 2 weeks from now, we'll do the leg vessels, and then in 3 weeks will be your practical. So we have 3 weeks, but as you know, time goes by quickly. So as soon as you can, make sure you stay up with these vessels. Okay, let's start with blood vessels in and around the heart. I'm going to open up a new, I guess I can just erase this one. On your lab objective sheet, you will see a list of the vessels you need to know. One column is the column for arteries, and then another column is the column for veins. When we meet again in lab, I'm going to have some handouts for you where you can practice filling in the vessels. I've got handouts labeled of the human vasculature. I've got handouts unlabeled, so you have plenty of resources. But I just want to make sure I walk you through the easiest way, I think. So my suggestion is to memorize in chunks. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to memorize everything together. Like if we just look at these vessels, it's a lot. So I'm going to suggest that you do it in chunks. The first place we're going to start, so we're going to start with arteries, and we're going to start near the heart. So let's do arteries. The first thing I would suggest is that, let me go back here. The first thing I would suggest is that you memorize the 4 regions of the aorta. So we already know the aorta because we did it in the heart, but now we're going to start to expand from that. And what we find is the aorta changes name. The same vessel changes name based on location and blood flow. So the initial part of the aorta is the ascending aorta because blood is going in an ascending direction. The second part of the aorta, it's the same vessel, it just changes name, is the aortic arch, shaped like an arch. Then we're going to have, notice it goes behind the heart. The third section is the descending thoracic aorta. We're in the thorax, and the blood is now going in a descending direction. Then it's going to pop back anteriorly and go down the abdomen, and that's the descending abdominal aorta. So this is where I would suggest starting. Memorize the 4 regions of the aorta. You're going to see I have posted on Brightspace a lab worksheet. So you're familiar with me in lab. This semester we're going to have 2, and our first one is a blood vessel one. So it's posted on Brightspace. It's a chance for you to get points in something other than the practicals. And I really hope it's going to help you to study. One of the things I'm going to ask you to do is draw. I know, watch out. The reason I'm asking you to draw is because I do think that it's a good way to study. So if we were going to draw what we just did, the 4 regions of the aorta, I'm going to use red because we're talking about arteries. So we know the main artery coming off the heart is the aorta. But now we're going to take it further. It's going to go behind the heart. Excuse me. And then it's going to come back out anteriorly. We remember from A&P1 the structure that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominopelvic cavity is the diaphragm. Perfect. So now we can list the 4 regions of the aorta. The first region is the ascending aorta because blood is going in an ascending direction. The other benefit of doing this is you can practice writing. So the first thing is the ascending aorta. Then we have the aortic arch because it's formed like an arch. Then we have the descending thoracic aorta behind the heart. Descending thoracic aorta. Same vessel, it just changes names. And then we come back anteriorly and we have the descending abdominal aorta. Okay. So this is where I would suggest starting. And by drawing it, you really have to know it. The next thing I would suggest, so memorize in chunks. The next thing I would suggest would be to memorize the 3 branches coming off the aortic arch. You may remember seeing these or the beginning little nubs of these in the heart models. Well, now we're going to follow them. So 3 branches off of the aortic arch. We have 1 branch, 2 second branch, and our 3rd branch. This is where it might be good to memorize some kind of mnemonic device. For some reason, I've always remembered it as BCS. I'm a nerd, as you know, so I'm a college football fan. Bowl Championship Series is what it used to be, BCS. Whatever way you can remember this. The other day in lab, some of the students were just going onto Google and typing in ways to remember the 3 branches off the aortic arch, and it can give you some ideas. But is there something you can use to remember BCS? We are going to have to make sure that we add the left, because it's going to be left common carotid and left subclavian. We'll discuss the cat next week in lab. Indeed, the cat only has 2 branches, not 3, off of its aortic arch, but we're going to focus on the human for now. So 3 branches off of just the aortic arch, and I've labeled these from right to left. So it's brachiocephalic artery, left common carotid artery, and left subclavian artery. It's important to add the left. It's important to know that it's common carotid because later it's going to become external or internal carotid. Memorize these in chunks. So if I go back, if I go back to this drawing, now we can add from here, right? So now we can focus on the 3 branches off of the aortic arch. 3 branches off of the aortic arch. Let me go back to the red. Here we go. All right. So now we're going to do our, and I'm just going to keep it going because we're going to need this later. So it'll make my life easier. It may be intimidating at first, but everyone, you can totally do it, okay? Memorize it in chunks. Don't wait till the last minute. So we're going to do now the 3 branches off of the aortic arch. And we're going from that person's right. We always say right or left as it is in that person. All right, here we go. So the first one is the brachiocephalic artery. Then we have the left common carotid artery. These are all arteries. Left common carotid. Then we have the left subclavian artery. You're just going to have to memorize these. Brachiocephalic, left common carotid, left subclavian. Boom, boom, boom. If you can think of some mnemonic, B, you can add in L if you want, however you want to do it. For me, I've always remembered it as BCS. From that person's right to left, brachiocephalic, left common carotid, and left subclavian arteries. Good. Next, I would suggest memorizing the vessels by region. So what have we done? I'm trying to introduce it to you in chunks. These would be good ways to memorize it. First, memorize the 4 regions of the aorta. Ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending thoracic aorta, descending abdominal aorta. Then, memorize the 3 arterial branches coming off of the aortic arch. Brachiocephalic, left common carotid, left subclavian. Next, we're going to memorize vessels by region. I want to start with the neck. Do I have a better picture? No. So here it says head, but I'm going to start with neck. So let me just go back to this drawing. Ideally, you're going to be able to draw an entire human with these basic vessels. You could just do a stick figure. God knows I can't draw that well, so that's probably what I would do. But that's okay, just to give us the main idea. So we're building and memorizing it in chunks. Now we're going to get to the neck. So we can also label or identify vessels by region. So check it out. The arteries in the neck are the left and right common carotid. So up top here was our left common carotid. Now we're adding the right, and these are both common carotid arteries. Left and right common carotid arteries. This is what you feel for with a pulse. The left common carotid just so happens to come off the aortic arch. The right common carotid actually comes off the brachiocephalic. You don't necessarily need to know how every one branches. If, on an exam, I point to a big artery in the neck, it has to be left or right common carotid artery. So you can also try and make this a little easier by thinking about region. If I ask you a big artery in the neck, must be left or right common carotid artery. Now, as we go up towards the head, I had to move my artery title because I didn't leave enough space. As we continue up towards the head, there's going to be a branching. Okay, so coming off of the heart, near the heart, it's the left or right common carotid. But as we get up towards the head, there's a split. The one that splits off towards the inside, not surprisingly, is the right and left internal carotid. The ones that split towards the inside, medially, are the right and left internal carotid. The continuation is now external carotid. We're going to see this trend also. Further down, the vessel is considered common, right and left common carotid. But then there's a branching, internal carotid. And then the continuation of what was the common is now the external. So again, it's really the same vessel. It just changes names. In the neck, it's always going to be right and left common carotid. As we get a little bit higher, there'll be a branch to the inside, internal carotid, but the continuation of what was the common carotid is now the external carotid. You can do this, everyone. You got it. I actually think on your lab sheet, internal carotid is crossed off, so you don't need to know it. But you need to know that branch exists because it is after that branch that it becomes external carotid. Prior to that branch, closer to the heart, in the neck, it's common. All right, so we just identified the arteries of the neck. The last part to fill in would be the arteries of the upper limb. So we started in the heart and we worked our way out. So now we're just going to do the arteries of the limb. This one, some of the labels are a little off. So they're actually pointing to nothing. But this one is also about region. So just like we said with the neck, if I ask you a big vessel in the neck, left and right, common carotid. Now when we get to the arm, we're also going to be doing region. The word subclavian, let me use black here, maybe it'll show up a little better. The word subclavian means under clavicle. So if I ask you an artery that's located in and around the clavicle, subclavian. What does axillary mean? Axillary means armpit. So if I ask you a vessel near the armpit, axillary. We're moving down the arm here. We're moving distally. If I ask you brachial, that really means arm. And then, of course, radial and ulnar, now we're in the forearm. Radial is on the thumb side of the forearm. That's where you take another pulse. Ulnar is on the pinky side of the forearm. So here we see again the same vessel changes names. Brachiocephalic is where it comes right off the aortic arch. Subclavian, when it goes under the clavicle. Same vessel, changes name by region. Axillary is the same vessel located near the axilla or armpit. Brachial, it's in the arm. And then radial, forearm, thumb side. Ulnar, forearm, pinky side. So now we can finish this off. And I'm going to get rid of this just so we can more clearly, of course you need to know it, but just to make our life a little bit clearer as we're doing this. So we're still doing arteries, and now we're going to follow this out, right? Now, there's a little bit of a difference here between the right and the left. This is why it's going to be always important to remember. You're always going to want to go back to those three branches coming off of the aortic arch. Because here, it's brachiocephalic. I'm just reviewing. Here, it's brachiocephalic artery on the right side. But on the left side, what comes directly off of the aortic arch? Left subclavian. In other words, is there a left brachiocephalic artery? No. There's a right brachiocephalic artery because it comes right off the aortic arch, but there's not a left brachiocephalic artery because coming right off the aortic arch is subclavian. If you memorize those three branches off the aortic arch, you will always be able to go back to this. So there is a slight difference between right and left. But now we can continue, right? So on this side, this would be right subclavian. So there is a subclavian artery on both sides. What does it become in the armpit? Or axillary region? Axillary artery. What does it become in the arm? Brachial artery. What does it become in the forearm? Thumb side is radial. Pinky side is ulnar artery. Of course, there are other arteries branching off. These are the main ones. It's the same on the right and the left from subclavian on. The only difference is the brachiocephalic. There's a brachiocephalic artery on the right side, but not the left. All right, let me open one for veins. Folks, you can do this. The good thing is that once you learn the arteries, the veins are very similar. The veins are very similar. Guess what? Brachiocephalic, subclavian, axillary, brachial, radial, ulnar, same in the veins. So I would suggest learning the arteries first. They're a little bit harder because of that difference with the aortic arch 3 branches. And then I would suggest doing the veins. Remember, you have a whole bunch of pictures here, okay? These have more vessels than you need to know. I'm trying to simplify it. All right, so now, excuse me. Now, let's switch gears to veins. Still gonna need red for the heart. You already know a lot of these, don't you? You already know the main veins that come to the top and bottom of the heart. What's this one down here? Inferior vena cava. This is going to run right alongside the descending abdominal aorta. Of course, these arteries and veins run right beside each other, but I do think it's easier to memorize them separately. And then, of course, this one up here is the superior vena cava. Start there, folks. Now, let's follow the superior vena cava up. What's going to be great about the superior vena cava and the veins is that it's a mirror image. Where there was a difference, a slight difference on the right and left because of the 3 branches off of the aortic arch, the veins, right to left, are a mirror image of each other, which does make it easier. So let's start labeling. And folks, you already know this. What's our first branch going to be? Right and left brachiocephalic vein. Just makes a wishbone. It's a right and a left brachiocephalic vein. What does it become a little further out under the clavicle? Subclavian. What does it become in the arm? Brachial. And I'm going to use this side for a reason you'll understand in a minute. And of course, in the forearm, what does it become? Radial and ulnar. So you already know this from, oh, I missed axillary. See, I got to make sure I check myself. Axillaries in the armpit. I knew it was missing one. The veins are great because they're mirror images. So coming up from the heart, even though we know blood is going down towards the heart, it might be easier to build it drawing from the heart out. Superior vena cava. And then there's a split, right and left brachiocephalic veins, right and left subclavian veins, right and left axillary veins, right and left brachial veins, and then in the forearm, right and left ulnar and radial veins. Same as the arm branches here are same as the arteries. What are some differences? And I'm going to put differences, it might seem weird, but I'm going to put differences in green. Even though veins are blue, it's just going to be easier, I think. Let's talk about region. We talked about the neck. The arteries in the neck are the right and left common carotid artery. You really need to practice right and left common carotid artery in the neck. What about the veins? The only veins that I'm going to ask you in the neck are the external jugular veins. right and left external jugular. This would be the right external jugular. So if I'm asking you a big vein in the neck, so now we're talking about neck. If I ask you a big vein in the neck, right and left external jugular. The words get tricky because in the neck, it's right and left external jugular. But in the neck, it's right and left common carotid artery. All right? All right, good job, folks. Bear with me. The reason why I purposely did ulnar and radial on the other side of this picture is because I wanted to show you some added veins. And I'm going to get rid of this just so I have more space to write. I would recommend memorizing it at first the same as the arteries, right? Brachiocephalic, subclavian, axillary brachial, radial ulnar. But now I want to focus only on the arm. And I'm using a different color so it'll hopefully stand out. Imagine now we're focusing only on the arm, not the armpit or above, and not the forearm. If I'm looking only at the arm, of course down here, it is going to split, right, into the radial and ulnar. But I want to focus only on the arm. Excuse me. Just like the arteries, the vessel that runs right down the middle of the arm is the brachial vein. But now we have two added ones. There's one that goes medial. Actually, let me, can I undo that? Oh, I know I can. I don't remember how to do that on this program. Oh, right here. There we go. Figured it out. Only took me an hour. The one up here is a little higher. This one's a little lower. Okay. So there's going to be an added branch in the arm. One that goes medial and one that goes lateral. But still, the one in the middle going down the arm is the brachial. I'm adding one that's medial and lateral. Maybe I will number it to make it easier. So we have the one that's medial in the arm, the one that's in the middle in the arm, and the one that's lateral in the arm. The vein in the arm, let me just use black, wouldn't that be easier to see? I don't know why I did that. The one that is medial in the arm, these are added ones, is the basilic vein. Basilic, right here. The way that I remember that, don't laugh at me, is BO. It's closer to the armpit because it's medial. So if someone has BO, I think of the letter B, basilic vein. The vein in the middle of the arm, like we already know, so we already know this, is the brachial vein. We already know that. But now we're adding one lateral, and that is the cephalic vein. So the one out here is the cephalic. So this might be the easiest way to memorize it. In the arm, there are three veins you need to know. The one we already know, running down the middle, is the brachial. But what we've done is we've added only in the arm a medial vein, basilic, and then a lateral vein, cephalic. All right? Lastly, you need to know a vein that runs across the front of your elbow. And that is the median cubital vein. This is a terrible drawing. But for purposes of first memorizing it, median cubital vein. This runs diagonal in the front of the elbow, or the antecubital space. This is where we commonly take blood from. So think of the median cubital vein as in the elbow region, right? We just kind of broke it up. I just talked about three vessels of the arm, basilic, brachiocephalic veins. Moving down, moving distally, the vein that's in the front of your elbow, where we take blood from commonly, median cubital vein. And then moving finally furthest down in the forearm, radial and ulnar vein. Okay, folks, this is your task to memorize it. Draw it, use the pictures. You don't need to know anything extra, only the ones that I've listed. Please do it in chunks. Some people like to make a chart like this, if that helps you. I prefer to draw it, whatever works for you. This is your charge. Next time we're going to do the vessels of the gut, and then lastly, vessels of the leg. Any questions, let me know.